I'm super excited to have Meta of Ringwell here with us. She currently works at a large public aerospace company as an Agile Transformation and Communication Coach. Thank you so much for talking to me here at Y4 Consulting. We'll be exploring effective communication and storytelling. I know you're a big advocate for effective storytelling and good communication, so I'm excited to discuss this with you, Meta. What is corporate storytelling and why are you so passionate about this?
So you're hitting directly at the heart of my passion, particularly in the last few years. So thanks so much for inviting me to be on here. Storytelling is really about using all these tried and true techniques that we've been doing for a millennium. We can track storytelling back 30,000 years and know that that's how our brains are formed. That's how we have developed to associate information with. And so using that same way is really putting it into a context that humans can follow and gain better understanding. They can it allows them to empathize with you. It allows them you to get a message out, the intended message out, and gain really a foothold into that communication, higher level communication, to make sure you're aligned and going the same direction.
That's amazing. Okay, so in corporate storytelling, and then there's personal storytelling, are they different? And if so, how?
So that's a really good question. There's ultimately it's the same intent, right? I'm sorry, the same skill set. It's really the same skill set of being able to draw out different alignments and different details that really make either your story or their story that you're trying to say resonate with your audience. There's something called the hero's story, which Joseph Campbell came up with a theory. I don't know how many years ago, but it was kind of this journey that the hero went on and found challenges and made decisions over how they were going to proceed forward, and a lot of that then is brought into the personal brand storytelling. So while the framework may be slightly different, really the skill set is the same, and the message intent, of course, is a little bit different because you're talking about yourself compared to, let's say, a product or an innovation that you're trying to promote. But really, when it comes down to it, it's kind of along the same skill lines.
That makes sense. How can effectiveness be measured if it's in a corporate space?
Yeah, so I mean, we how many hours do we really spend in meetings trying to align and make sure people have the same message? And I mean, how many times have you been in a presentation or something where you walk out and you talk to your coworker and you have completely different ideas over what you've just heard or what the intent of that is? And so the storytelling is interesting because it aligns with your brain. It aligns with all the different kinds of learners. You've got visual learners, which are about 40%, audio, um, auditory learners, which is about for another 40%, and kinesthetic learners, which is 20%. And when you start storytelling, you're really drawing in all of those different learners, different ways of doing that, either by pictures, by words, or by those tangible feelings, those add-ons that you're including into the story as you tell it. And so what happens is you end up having a lot more alignment over an understanding, over vision, over direction. And ultimately, it comes down to the cost of meetings. Like, how many more meetings do you have to have in order to make sure that everybody is talking the same language or actually delivering on the same intent or the same product, the same solution? So you can measure that in regards to how many more meetings do you have to have, and how quickly is that story retold to you. If it comes back pretty quickly, then you know that that message is landing and you're doing a better job with your communicating.
That's a really good point. When I think about corporate leaders setting the tone for the vision of what their teams are going to deliver, how their corporation's going to deliver, we tied an emotional element to that in terms of we understand it, we get it, we know where we're going, and then you can kind of rally that. So I can see that being very important in that sense. How does data play into storytelling?
Well, so data really needs to form the story or the vision that you're telling. It's not kind of like an either or, right? You build your story on the data, and when you need to validate what you're saying, that's when you bring up the data. You don't kind of just throw up a slide and let your audience get confused over all the numbers, or as they're busy trying to calculate, did you get the numbers right, or did you get your equation right? What you really want to do is make sure that as you're talking and as you're making your points and you're going through your story, that whatever data you need to reinforce what you're talking about is then appears. And so it's not like an either or,
Mm,
it's a duality of when you need the data to support, add it in. You don't want to go crazy with the data, and there are some schools of thought that are like, hey, be super careful about how you put data up there, making sure that the message is correct. There's a gentleman named Tufte. If anybody's interested in learning more about how to actively and effectively present data in presentations, you can Google him, and he actually has a white paper that talks about that.
great. Now, one more question for you. As you work to champion storytelling in your company, because that is something you're passionate about to create transformation, what has been the biggest challenge, as well as what's been the biggest win that you've seen?
Sure. So I'll start with the challenge and I'll wrap it up with the win. So there's a combination of resistance to change in general, and somewhat to a growth mindset. Carol Dweck really talks about the fixed mindset versus the growth mindset, and shifting your way of communicating when potentially you've been doing something for a long time. It really takes a growth mindset, takes some risk. Sometimes it takes some psychological safety in the environment that you're in, which can be really, really hard. And that's kind of that fear factor of either doing something different, being the first out there to do it, and maybe not landing it the first time, right? And so if you're gambling a lot on the first one, that's a real big fear factor over how to do that. And it really takes a lot of practice. Right, you have to be willing to get in there and practice and revise and practice, and make sure that your story is landing on the other side to your audience, and then really kind of like making sure that as you start, you prepare the first line. You know what first line you're going to start with, and usually everything flows out from there if you know that story really, really well. A couple of the wins that we've had, and kind of really excited about these are. I worked with a team that was presenting data to the leadership team, as a result of an employee experience survey, and they worked through the story arc. They also had some great workshops or brainstorming in regards to, hey, so who's our audience? What really is top of mind for them? What are they really interested in hearing compared to, hey, we got to give them all this data? They were really cognizant over making sure that what they were delivering was going to land to their audience. So that was a great experience. The other thing was that I was working with a team, as an innovation team, that was going to be going to a big conference upcoming in Europe, and they've really been challenged with showing business value out to the leadership and to their audience. And so I went through and I was teaching them a couple of different formats that they could use. And the one that I actually focused on came out of Houston. We Have a Narrative by Randy Olson. So really, really recommend that book. And they just love that and were able to develop a story and deliver to the conference. So definitely really happy about that one.
That's fantastic. Now let's end with this one. So, as people are listening, they're thinking, great, I want to be better at storytelling. So, how does one get better at storytelling?
So number one, practice. You have to try something, take a risk. You can start small. Metaphors are a great way to get your feet wet. You're aligning things next to each other. So you're saying this is like this, or this is this, depending on if you want a simile or a metaphor. Um, and you're really kind of getting your brain prepared to do that. So that's a really good one. But be careful though, because as you get bigger ideas, metaphors don't necessarily land on those. Those are really for small ideas, and just trying to make sure everybody understands. There's also a ton of information out there about different frameworks and structures and best practices. The best book that I've read, amongst a lot of other really great books, is The Leadership's Guide to Storytelling by Stephen Denning. And I think I mentioned the other one, which was Houston, We Have a Narrative by Randy Olson. So would really recommend those two when you're starting out and getting some ideas over how to start presenting in the corporate environment.
I have one last question for you because you've been doing this for a little while now and you're seeing this trend continue to maybe grow in the corporate space. Is that something that do you think is a trend? Do you think it's here to stay? What are your thoughts on this?
Well, I definitely hope it's here to stay. I see it in a lot of different companies. I know Microsoft has done some internal storytelling conferences for their whole company. You see the result in how Satya, the Microsoft leader, presents and has shifted the whole vision towards AI and the chat GBT narrative. So incredible effectiveness there. I hear it in just about every single space about storytelling. I still don't see it as much executed on, but I definitely see a lot of people talking about it. So I think it's just beginning and it's building up, but it is a skill that you have to build on and you have to really practice.
Yeah. Thank you so much for that. And I will say this is something I've gone through from a personal branding storytelling as well as how to storytell in corporate. And it is like a muscle. You have to continue practicing to get better. And in the beginning, I always felt it was a little uncomfortable and I didn't quite know where to go with the storytelling pieces of it. And over time, I've seen that, you can get better if you keep practicing this. So it's a skill I'm still trying to perfect. Meta, thank you so much for your time. Very much appreciate it. You gave some really great recommendations as well from a starting point as well as reading. So I'll post that in the notes as well. Thank you so much for your time.
All right, great. Thanks so much, Sandra.